There we go. There we go. All right. So we're here for another interview on Always Say Yes to Adventure. This is, of course, an action adventure channel. And a lot of the stuff we had before was action. Now we have action and adventure with our guest, Stuart Douglas. Good morning, Stuart. Well, it's morning here.
Good morning and good afternoon UK time. Yeah, so it's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon here.
Okay, well, good afternoon to you,
Humid.
sir.
Yeah, so got the afternoon cup of tea.
Okay, I had my morning coffee. So the whole thing started with me reading your article about
Mm.
your life as a frogman. And in the 007 GB website article page. And I have to say, I was absolutely blown away. I mean,
Thank you.
it was an amazing story, an amazing career, and I just had to talk to you to learn more about it because I think I read the article like 3, 4 times just to absorb everything that you had done and everything you had gone through. Before we start into it, this is also, kind of a James Bond themed, since
Yeah.
I found it in the James Bond in 007 GB website. How did you get into James Bond?
From childhood, really, it was a staple of Christmas and bank holiday TV. They would rerun old Bond films. Um, and it became a family tradition that when a new Bond film came out, we'd go to the cinema to see it. And I think the first one that I saw cinema-wise was Diamonds Are Forever. But I was born in 63, so I kind of played catch up with the 62, 63 films up to Diamonds Are Forever. But the one that stuck in my mind most was Thunderball, really. The underwater set piece, the Ivan Tors set piece at the end, was just fantastic. And it tied in with a lot of what I used to watch as a child. We used to watch The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Anything underwater really fascinated me. So that aspect of the films was great. And the whole escapism of Bond at that time was just fantastic. We had a limited choice of films to go and see. And when that came out, it was just pure escapism and really caught my imagination. And that was it. From 8, 10 years old, I've been a Bond fan.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, for me, Thunderball was the first James Bond film I ever saw as well. I saw them on, again, it wasn't like a holiday thing here. It was like whenever. It was pretty random. But yeah, I saw the Thunderball, and the whole underwater, scene to me was just mind blowing. Both my parents were certified scuba divers, and I remember seeing all the equipment when I was really young. I'm only about 3 years younger than you, believe it or not. But
You look well.
thank you. Partially genetics and a lot of olive oil. Yeah, and also the underworld of Jacques Cousteau. That was a favorite, TV show of mine as well. So, underwater also held a fascination for me. But then you chose to take it to the next level. I mean, I'm just a weekend, like a holiday scuba diver. I just do little, scuba dives when we're on holiday, and then we go, I'm rated for like 60 feet. I think the biggest thing I ever done was some cave diving and some wreck diving, and that's it.
No, it was odd actually because I didn't learn to swim till I was 11 and was almost afraid of the water. My parents tried to get me to learn to swim from an early age, and I had every excuse under the sun as to why I couldn't or wouldn't do it. So there was a bit of a juxtaposition between my fascination with the underwater world and my lack of ability to actually swim, even doggy paddle on the surface. My original career choice, I'd set out to join the UK Air Force as a jet pilot. And that was the career that I'd set myself on. Due to one thing or another, that didn't materialize. I ended up joining our Navy and kind of fell into the diving by accident. They had what they call part-time ship's divers, which were paid a slight amount more, that used to do basic underwater maintenance, and they were effectively scuba, rated to 30 meters, and just effectively part-time. And I realized that I enjoyed doing that more than I did the job that I was actually trained to, which was weapons engineering. So I eventually changed over career branches and so went through the selection process for full-time diver, which set me on the course that I ended up on.
Yeah, but that required an immense amount of fitness. It sounds like from your
Oh,
art. It sounded
yeah, absolutely. It was
how
it
fit
was
were
a
you?
it was actually, to go back to the start. We had a literally thrown into it for the part-time diver. You went to the training school, did a 30-meter chamber dive to see if you could clear your ears. Someone put a set on your back, and you were almost just pushed into the water and told to sit at the bottom of a ladder and come up when your air had ran out. And that was the basic process. But the 4-week course that I went on for that, we were just verbally and physically abused for 4 weeks because the instructor's raison d'etre was to get rid of us.
Yeah.
And that kind of spurred me on to want to do the next one, for which we did a week selection, which was basically early mornings, late nights. If we weren't diving, we were running, lots of physical endurance tasks, running with telegraph poles, running on the mud flats, crawling on the mud flats when the tide was out, oxygen closed circuit dives, 4 or 5 dives a day, and having to make a 2-kilometer swim in less than an hour just to hit the basic targets that they required.
Oh my God.
So yeah, you had to really go some, and yeah, it challenged the fitness, it challenged the will to do it. The whole basis of that week was to try and weed out those that didn't really want to put themselves through what was required to go onto the course. I think we lost 3 or 4 on the selection week that, for one reason or another, didn't get offered a course place. And even if you completed the week, there was no guarantee that they'd offer you a place on a course. If they didn't think that you would be a fit for the branch, regardless of how physically fit you were or how you completed, you just get cut, and that would be, sorry, try again next year.
Is this the part where they had the bee stings where they would
Well,
punish
we got
you?
that all the time, all the time. The first thing they do is the training lake is 1 kilometer long. It was an old torpedo testing lake. I think I've sent you a couple of pictures of it. So the bus would drop off at the bottom of the lake, and we would run the kilometre up to the training school. When we were about 200 or 300 meters away from the school, the instructor would throw a thunder flash, which was like a large M80 firework. But when that went off, we had 2 minutes to get into our dive suits, fins under our arms, ready to start the morning. If we didn't, then basically, depending upon the mood of the instructor, we'd either have to get in the lake in whatever state of dress we were in, or more punishment will be added onto it. We started off with what they called circuits, off of a 6-meter board, swim the 100 meters across the lake with the fins on, get out, run around, repeat that 3 times before we'd even start the day. If we caused the instructors any problems, more circuits would be added on. So we could end up doing 5, 6 circuits before we'd even start the day. Then it would be sets on and just swim up and down the lake, and until we had an hour's endurance on the rebreathers due to the CO2 absorbing. So we were expected to cut the 2 kilometers down to the bottom of the lake and back up in less than an hour. If we didn't, we had to get out where we were, run the long way around the island rather than the short way with the sets on, and then recharge, go again.
Oh my God.
And it was like that for a week, finishing 10 or 11 o'clock at night, go back to the barracks, get up early the next morning, rinse and repeat for 5 days.
Oh my God. What were some of the punishments that if you got, what were some of these bee stings?
Sit-ups, squat thrusts, burpees. If we ran out, because we were only allowed 6 dives a day, your oxygen toxicity built up in the body.
Yeah.
So you were allowed 6 hours in any 24 of breathing pure O2. So if we had some downtime and the tide was out, we'd be running across the mud flats to touch the walls of an old castle that was opposite the training lake, which was probably 300, 400 meters maybe. But to do that across on the mud, which was thigh deep in places. You'd end up crawling across. It was supposed to simulate going out onto an estuary to recover ordnance for bomb disposal, but it was just basically, it was a way of, again, causing us physical pain, testing our will to continue. We then carried telegraph poles around with us. So on the first day, we were given a telegraph pole that had to come everywhere with us.
Oh, that picture.
Yeah, that went everywhere. It went to breakfast, it went to lunch. If we did circuits, that would go off the board and we'd swim it across the lake, pick it up, carry it round, rinse and repeat. I think there was 8 of us on our selection, and I finished. People would just say, "That's not for me. I've had enough." And if the instructors heard you complaining, they'd quite easily go, "That's it. Pack your kit, go home.
Yeah,
You don't want this." And there was no course of appeal. You couldn't go to an appeal the decision. Their decision was final.
Yeah.
So you learn to keep quiet and do all your complaining when you were underwater.
Yeah. And so this was all the training phase still. What
That was
yeah,
week selection.
yeah.
So then I got offered a place on course. That started off, your first 4 weeks were based up at the training lake, and it was just a repeat of the week's aptitude that we did times 4. Same thing, it was oxygen closed circuit set, 6 dives a day. The 4th week we lived at the island, so you were basically, I think in the whole week we maybe got 4 hours unbroken sleep in the whole week. You'd finish late at night, go to bed, give it an hour or so, the staff would come in, throw a thunder flash into the room, you'd run down to the end of the dive school, get dressed, and it may just be, "I'll check the air pressure in your sets, lads," do that, go back to bed, get back to bed, hour goes by, rinse and repeat. Occasionally the instructors would drain our sets down, so we'd be forced to charge them up with a hand booster pump, which was basically 2 people on a pump just pumping each end to get the sets up to charge. We've had sets completely stripped down into the component parts where we've got to then rebuild and recharge them before we can get into the water. Just everything to cause you as much annoyance as possible. We've ended up towing the inflatable boat with the instructor in down the lake and back up until he said, "You'll do this until somebody quits."
Yeah,
it was probably the equivalent of Hell Week for the Buds course for SEALs.
Yeah.
Whereas it's limited sleep, lots of pointless tasks, just to test your resilience.
Yeah.
5th week we then went on to conducting ship's bottom searches. So you'd search for limpet mines, dummy limpet mines that the staff had placed. Punishments if you didn't find them, if you didn't complete the search in the required amount of time. We then went on to do seabed searches, then up to Scotland to do deep dives, 50 meters on air, 54 meters on semi-closed circuit rebreathers. Then at the finish of the dive phase, we had our bomb disposal phase.
That's the primary job of what you were preparing for, though, was bomb disposal?
It was, yeah. The primary job was explosive ordnance disposal, both wartime and what we call improvised explosive devices, the homemade explosives, terrorist type devices. My first team, most of our work was based around the Thames Estuary, where in the Second World War, the Germans had carpet bombed the Thames Estuary with mines. And even up into the 2000s, these are still being dredged up or found by fishing boats. About 1,600 pounds of explosive, and that they were dealt with simply dive on the mine, identify it, place a 4-pound explosive pack on the mine to create a sympathetic detonation, and then get out and blow it up.
Wow. Amazing.
We also had underwater engineering tasks, so ships alongside in harbour, we'd be responsible for doing engineering tasks such as up to and including changing a whole propeller blade, which is about 1.25 tons of bronze, to get out and get a new one back in again. So you'd spend a full working day. I mean, one of my first jobs, it was January, freezing cold. The visibility is 0 in Portsmouth Harbour. You barely can see a hand in front of your face. You were mostly working by feel.
Mhm.
And I was 6 hours in the water, absolutely frozen. The suit was leaking. I was wet inside. Got out after 6 hours and basically got the biggest telling off I've had off of my boss, because he wanted 8 hours in the water, not 6. So
Oh,
yeah, and I was probably up to my knees. My suit was filled up to my knees. The dry suit got holes in it. It wasn't mine. I'd just joined. I hadn't got any kit issued. So someone said, "Oh, you take mine." Leaked, and I was freezing. You could barely work with gloves on because of manual dexterity.
right.
So it involved drilling holes and putting a tap in to tap for new screws to be put in. So trying to do that in almost complete darkness with no gloves on in January temperature waters, which is probably Celsius, 4 or 5 Celsius. So I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. Probably about 40.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That, I mean,
chilly.
you're talking hypothermia,
Yeah, I was
setting it.
shivering when I got out, absolutely
Yeah.
shivering.
And you
And
probably,
yeah, I learned that basically I was right at the bottom of the ladder learning my trade.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was the first, I think, 9 months I did that job for, then went into what they call saturation diving,
Now, this is
which
where it gets really interesting. So
gets
explain saturation.
technical there.
Yeah, explain saturation diving to people who don't know what that is, because I mean, I
Right.
know I know what it is, but not, terribly in depth.
Without going too much into the physics, that when you're under pressure, your body absorbs gas,
Mhm.
kind of like it's the bottle of soda.
Yeah.
CO2 in a bottle of soda is under pressure. So while you're under pressure, your body absorbs gas, just like that,
Yeah.
up to a point, at which point the body will absorb no more gas. And that's what's called, it reaches saturation point.
Yep.
So provided you remain at that depth, your body will not absorb any more gas, and
Right.
therefore your decompression will not increase.
Mhm.
So if for people who are kind of not divers, you can only spend so long underwater before you absorb enough gas. When you surface, that gas will come out of your blood effectively.
Yeah.
And if you open a bottle of soda too quickly, the bubbles that occur and the spillage that occurs is kind of a more extreme version of what will happen in your body if you ascend too quickly without doing what they call decompression stops, and gives you the classic disease, the bends, which was
Yeah.
called because the bubbles tend to accumulate in joints, and the
Mhm.
pain occurs when you either try and bend or straighten the joint out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with saturation diving, they realized that a person could spend days at a depth
Mhm.
and not suffer any more decompression penalty. So it was more effective for work at deep depths to put divers into saturation for 10, 12 days, working around the clock. So what you ended up doing was you lived in chambers inside a ship
Mhm.
and then excurted via a diving bell to the dive site.
Mhm.
So the diving bell would be locked onto the chambers. The team would go into that. You'd go through the bottom of the ship, out to the dive site. Divers would come out, do their work, back in, and rinse and repeat until the job was done. Um, and then you do one long decompression to
Yeah.
bring you back to the surface.
What
So
kind of
that's
suit?
basic
What kind of suit did you have at those depths? What were you wearing?
hot water suit. So you'd have a thin neoprene, like a 2 mil rash guard type suit, surf suit. And over the top of that would be a 12 mil hot water suit, which was thick neoprene. And running through that were tubes with small holes in. And hot water would be flushed down from the surface to your suit, and you'd be flushed through with hot water all the time. The thing with helium, breathing the helium mix at that depth, is helium conducts heat 6 times faster than air. So you
Mhm.
could actually freeze to death from the inside.
Mhm.
Your body will be trying to heat that gas up, and you could freeze to death from the inside. So below 50 meters, the suit had to be heated. Below 150 meters, your gas was heated as well. So a shroud was over the regulator, and hot water would be flushed through that.
Wow. Wow. Did you have the
So
funny
yeah,
voice
I
with
think
the helium?
the thing with the helium, we had a translator that you could on the comms system outside. It didn't really work. So after about a day, your ear would get attuned to what people were saying, but you found yourself speaking a lot slower.
Okay.
so that you could actually understand yourself in the chamber and understand each other, and the crew on the outside could, which caused a confusion as you started to ascend and you came back out and you were off helium and on gas, or air, you'd find yourself talking slower for a little while till you pick back up to normality. The first few hours in sat, you can't understand anything anybody says because you speak at a normal pitch, normal speed, and it was chipmunks on scramblers, really.
Yeah, yeah. You described the decompression process as being 11 days.
Yeah, from the
What did you
300-meter
do?
dive we did in Norway, for a 19-day dive, it was 20 hours to compress us down to storage depth. We spent a few days at storage depth working, and then the decompression was 11 days, 3 hours, 5 minutes
In a diving bell.
in a chamber on deck. So
Oh, in a
it was
chamber.
the quarters were cramped. They were not luxurious. 6 of us in a chamber, with the beds arranged in a U-shape, bunk beds. Not a lot of room to move. You had to really get on with people. There was zero privacy.
Yeah.
Everything was controlled from the outside. So if you took a shower, you used the toilet, it was all on camera, and you had to get the life support technicians on the outside to flush the toilet for you, control the shower. No privacy whatsoever for the entire time that you were in there. So it's quite invasive, claustrophobic. So yeah, you really had to be tolerant and get on with people.
Yeah. So, and cures any shyness that you might have.
Yeah, you can't get by being shy. What I mean, when you're using the toilet and someone's watching you on camera and you've got a signal to them that you've finished, and that they can then use the interlocking valve system to flush the toilet, because if you didn't have the interlocking valve system, you could effectively empty the chambers of gas, which if you're sat on it, you become a very effective gas plug.
Oh, Jesus. What
Yeah,
did you what did you do to pass the time in those 11 days?
Trivial Pursuit. I mean, give it back then. We didn't have mobile telephones. We didn't have
Yeah.
iPads. There was no television. So you'd read, or you'd play Trivial Pursuit.
Yeah.
And on the decompression phase, there was nothing to do. No dives. Just sat in bed, played
Yeah.
games, drank coffee for a long time.
Wow. So then after that mission, then you went into Desert Storm started, right?
Yeah. So I joined
Well, Desert
what's called
Storm
Fleet.
for Americans.
Yeah, 1989, I joined Fleet Diving Unit 2, which was the Navy's worldwide operations team. So we spent a lot of time away on exercise with American SEALs, EOD divers, with French, Belgians, a lot of the European and Allied nations we were working with on exercises. And in December of 1990, we were put on standby to go out to Kuwait to assist, obviously, with the invasion. January 1991, we actually got activated and spent from January and February working in the northern Persian Gulf, clearing sea lanes of mines and ordnance. So that was effectively what we trained to do right from the start, was to dive on enemy ordnance and neutralize or dispose of it. So far from these being old World War II mines, these were actually active modern day mines with anti-handling devices built into them. So we trained on most of the types that we were likely to encounter. The Iraqis had bought a lot of stuff from Italy. So we'd got access to a lot of the Italian mines that were basically set up with all the electronics active, but not the explosives. And we'd done quite a few exercises on these to learn how to avoid the anti-handling devices on them. And it was simply just put an explosive pack on, blow it up. We had to recover one particular type for sending back to England that they'd not encountered before. So one of the lads managed to recover one of those intact. Um, then in February, we moved ashore after the ceasefire. We moved ashore into Kuwait and started the job of clearing up all the ordnance that had been left and clearing the beaches. At one point, just before the ceasefire, before the invasion had started, we were briefed that we were going to conduct amphibious ops. So the plan was that it was going to be an amphibious attack, assault on the beaches of Kuwait, and we were required to swim in from about 10 meters depth into surf zone to identify and mark up obstructions, sort of mines, anti-tank, anti-landing craft obstructions, then go back the next night and place explosive packs on them in readiness for the supposed amphibious assault. We were told then there'd be no artillery support from at sea, so that the guns would stop. There would be our team, 24 men, SEALs, Marine Force Recon from the US, French Foreign Legion, would all have set lanes along the beaches to patrol. And they estimated 50 to 75% losses up against opposed beaches. So we were told basically, write your wills, write a letter home, seal it up, hand it in, and worst comes to the worst, they'll get sent off. And it was quite sobering to sit around after the briefing and think, well, there's 24 of us and maybe only 6 are going to come back from this. Very, very sobering thought. And the decision was made as to who would be in what position and doing what job based upon anybody who was married with children wouldn't go. So it was all basically, then if you were married with no kids, you were sort of next bottom. The guys who were single with no girlfriends, we were top of the list for you're going. But every single one of us, even the guys who were married with kids, said they felt bad that they were not selected to be part of the team that would do the swim in. And when we actually got into Kuwait and saw the beaches that we were supposed to be swimming against, the 50 to 75% losses, I think, was optimistic.
Let me ask you, just when you're writing this letter and seeing what you're facing, what's going through your mind? What are you feeling at the time?
No, really, it was odd. It was a couple of the lads were very down. I had a pretty scant consideration for my own safety as a child, basically, and growing up. I paid no heed to my safety in a lot of things. I was reckless with a motorbike. I was reckless in pretty much everything I did. And I'm fortunate to actually still be here in one piece in a lot of instances. So it didn't actually bother me because it wasn't real. I'm guessing that if the op had come off and we had to have done it, it would have been a completely different matter. But I was probably the bane of my parents' life growing up. If I wasn't hurting myself in some stupid way or other, I was in trouble in some way or another. Yes,
on a much lesser level, I am still the same way, much to my wife's chagrin. Much less level.
Why didn't you just grow up? Because I find myself doing things that I think I should be capable of doing and not realizing that I'm no longer 25, 30 years old. And my body's telling me that you really can't do this. When I signed us up for endurance races, and she's like, what are we doing this for? Why are we doing this? You know, fun. And it's anything but fun. So yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, it's 33, nearly 34 years ago. It's hard to say what was going through. What we actually did was get a load of cases of beer out and get drunk.
Okay. As you do.
We had 2 choices: sit around and mope, or get drunk.
Exactly.
So the latter option.
But the actual operation never really happened, did it?
No, it was a distraction. It was a plan B that if the assault which took place from Saudi Arabia via the cavalry with the tanks, if that had not succeeded, then our plan was a go. Our chief and his second were called on to, was it the Missouri that was out there for a briefing? So all of the heads of teams were out there and basically told to come up with a plan for facilitating an amphibious assault. And the plan that we came up with was what was actually used prior to D-Day for swimmers to go up against the ordnance and the obstacles, mark them up, blow them up, and it worked. So on the basis of it worked then, it may well work 60 odd years later. So we were fortunate when we saw the state of the beaches with the anti-personnel mines, the razor wire, etc., and then the mine beaches, and they were all heavily defended. The chances of any of us getting out of that would have been next to zero. I've got a couple of friends who were UK Special Forces at the time, and they nicknamed it Operation Pink Mist.
God.
Basically because of how they thought it would have ended up. So yeah, that was the Gulf '91, which was great. It was doing what we're trained to do in the type of theatre that we were trained to do it in. And they don't come around that often. The only other time prior to that was the Falklands conflict in 1982. And then prior to that, it was World War II before any divers had actually been in conflict zones.
Right. Wow. So afterwards, you then you go into what happens after the war.
So after that, prior to that, I'd applied for Special Forces selection. A few of our lads, I've got this thing. If I do something, I can always see the next highest peak after that. And that's the thing I want to go for. It's almost self-defeating because eventually you come up against something that you're not going to manage to do. And so I decided that I wanted to go for Special Forces selection for our Special Boat Service, which is the primarily underwater and maritime operations. The UK has got 3 Tier 1 units: the Special Air Service, Special Boat Squadron, and the Special Reconnaissance Regiment. So we'd had a couple of lads who'd gone through and succeeded in the SAS and the SBS. A couple of lads prior to me on the unit I was on got quite a way through on their course before they were returned to unit. And I decided that's what I wanted to go for. So I set myself training prior to going away from the Gulf and came back in 1991, and my selection was in August. So I'd spent 3 or 4 months where I hadn't got any training in. Went down to Poole in the South Coast for a 2-week, what they call an acquaint, which was, if I thought my aptitude for my diving course was bad, this was 10 times worse. It was horrible, absolutely horrible from start to finish. In the fact that you received no feedback of how you were doing. Tasks were set which were impossible to complete without cheating. So you had a choice to make of fail and risk being removed from course, cheat and risk being removed from course. We were numerous physical beastings, far, far worse. And it was, they were actively trying to cut us down. I think there were 120 started on 2 weeks, and at the end of the 2 weeks, there were 16 left.
Wow.
It was a week of land work and then a week of water. So the land was based around 3 test marches of 10, 20, and 30 miles, carrying 70 pounds plus food and water. The 10-miler had to be completed in less than 3.5 hours. The 20 in less than 6.5, and the 30 in less than 12. If you came in under the time, any time that you had was banked, so you could afford to be a little bit later. If you came in overtime, then depending on how far over time you were, that time was taken off of your next amount of time you'd be allowed, so putting pressure on you, or you'd just be cut. Anybody who failed to come in at the 3.5 hour mark for the 10 mile was cut straight away. Water phase was swim tests, and then use of the 2-man canoe, which just involved miles and miles of paddling day and night. we just spent the entire time wet, cold, and in pain. My back was shredded from the straps of the rucksack, feet blistered. We're all carrying injuries. The hands were blistered from the canoeing. At the end of the 2 weeks, it was an absolute wreck. From the 2 weeks, we then went on to the course proper, and were told that in comparison, the 2 weeks that we'd just gone through would be a holiday. I think I lasted until just before we went to the jungle phase, where my soldiering skills were not up to scratch. I was keeping up, but they knew basically that I was struggling to keep up. And they said, out in the jungle, that environment would just break me. So they decided to cut me there and then not take me.
To go that far.
I was given the option of returning. I was given an option of going back and having another go. And this is where it comes. I don't think I wanted it enough that when I got home, I thought, I'm not going through that again.
Yeah.
Knowing, because I would have had to have started right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And to know what was coming would just be horrendous. So I didn't need it enough. And it was only a few years later, in fact, quite recently, that I actually realized that was just another test. Did I want it enough to go away and sort out what I needed to do and come back and do it again? And obviously, it was not for me. So that was then. And then from there, I got drafted to the Maritime Counter-Terrorist Unit, which was 12 guys, and we did bomb disposal support for the Tier 1 units.
Yeah, well, describe this one, because this is where it does get very Bond-like.
This is where it gets very Bond-like, yeah. So forgive the rambling that's gone on up to this point. This was the typical Bond stuff. This was the black-clad people exiting out of submarines, parachuted in, jumping out of helicopters, fast roping onto oil rigs, etc.
Yeah.
In hindsight, it was all very, very glamorous. At the time, not a lot of fun. Hard work all the way through. And the one thing about military diving is it saps every ounce of enjoyment you might get out of diving.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It makes people who like diving hate diving because none of it is enjoyable. Most of our operations and our training was done at night, obviously, for obvious reasons. It always seemed to be cold, and it was just hard graft. For instance, if we do 2 or 3 kilometer swim, approach to a target, you might climb 20 meters up a caving ladder after doing that 3K swim, and then you would start your actual operation, your infill and retake the target. We do fast boats alongside up the caving ladder to vessels that are underway, and it's physical endurance. You don't know whether you're familiar with caving ladders, but they're quite narrow.
Yeah.
And the rungs are very narrow, and you can't climb it like a normal ladder because they're flexible.
Yeah.
If you try and climb it with sort of overhand grip, all that'll happen is you'll just end up almost horizontal, falling backwards. So you end up hooking your arms around the inside and hooking your feet around, climbing with your heels and climbing with your biceps. And considering that you've probably got 20 or 30 pound of kit on with body armor, your IED disposal equipment, plus your sidearm, etc. To haul that up the ladder is quite a feat. You've got a hook on your harness that you can just hook onto the rung of the ladder and have a bit of a rest. But I've fallen off a couple of times. I've seen people fall off loads of times. You just, your grip goes and that's it. What you call peel off. You fall off, you try and recover, get up, do it again. So we spent lots of time training. I didn't actually do any live ops on that, but you train every single day. If you weren't on the range, you were in the lake, doing training swims, training climbs. You go away on exercise and do 300-400 meter swim plus a 2 ladder climb. Repeat that 3 or 4 times a day, day and night. And it was just really, really hard work. That was when I was, I think, peak fitness then.
You did some skydiving too.
Yeah, it was only static though.
It doesn't matter. You're still throwing yourself out of an airplane.
I hate heights, so that's the thing. I'm okay jumping out of aircraft. I
Yeah.
really don't like going up ladders,
Yeah. Oh
and
no.
I don't like standing on tall buildings.
Okay.
But I mean, in the Gulf, we were doing helicopter ops. So to try and find mine, we found that you could spot them quite easily from the air.
Yeah.
So you do a circular search with a Sea King helicopter, um, find one, take a transit at 180 degrees to see how the mines were laid in a stick, and then basically just drop out of the helicopter with the set on, 4 pounds of explosive strapped to your leg, ready-made detonator cord shoved behind the counterlung of the set, dive on the mine, pack, get the strop lowered down to you, light the fuse, away, do the next one.
Hmm.
And it is, again, ego, trying to one up. We'd always try and see who could go out the highest. Try and egg the pilot just to it start off
You
probably
have full
5, 6
scuba kit on.
with the rebreather, and the cylinder sat across the small of the back on the rebreather.
Yeah.
So there's a tendency to fall backwards if you didn't
Oh
actually
yeah.
make a physical effort to go forwards. But yeah, in full kit. So
Yeah.
I think the highest I've done probably about 15 meters in full kit. And again, stupid games. Just
Yeah.
your ego. Eventually, the pilot said, "No, no
Yeah.
more, no more
No.
stupid things." So that was good. So you like the
Yeah.
5 minute fuse. Once you're in the strop, you had an igniter. Just click the igniter, light the fuse, you hoist it up, get a good distance away before it went off. Then rinse and repeat. Go out and do the next one.
My God. And how long did you last in this job?
For the MCT one, it was a 2 year draft.
Hmm.
And then I did some time on a mine hunter at sea, didn't really like that. But
Mm.
it's just the thing you had to do. And then went back into the school in an instructional role.
Hmm.
Spent 3 years on the instructional team in the diving school. Then did my final job back on the original team that I started on just before I left. The last year and a bit in the job on that team.
Mm. And what did you have any like, interesting jobs that happened or?
Lots. One we did in Puerto Rico was a blade change. One of the frigates has snapped a propeller blade off,
Mm.
and we got flown out to Puerto Rico. We were on pagers. This was when I was on the fleet diving unit. So the pager went off, went back to the sections. We were on a rotor, so you'd be on 24/7 call on rotors. Our team was on a rotor, went back to the section, job on in Puerto Rico. So back up to the barracks, pack my shorts, pack my Hawaiian shirt, transport down to the Air Force Base where we always had a C-130 on standby for us.
Hmm.
Flown out, and we got on the route took us to Newfoundland first, Gander and Newfoundland in November. So the Hercules lands, door opens, we get out to minus temperatures, 6 foot of snow in Gander and Newfoundland. We had an overnight stop there while they refueled. And
Meanwhile,
we've got Hawaiian shirt.
yeah, you're all prepared for the tropics.
It was an interesting night out in the main strip in Gander, Newfoundland, with a bunch of Brits in the Hawaiian shirts. But that blade change, the fastest it had ever been done before, I think, was about 3 days.
Yeah.
And our boss gave us an option. He said we can work 8 till 4 till the job's done, or he said we work around the clock till the job's done. The flight back isn't until next week, so we just do the job, book into a hotel, and enjoy the subsistence because we were being paid to be out there.
Yeah.
So we volunteered to do work around the clock, split into 2 watches, a night watch and a day watch, and we had the job done in 23 hours from first diver in the water to last diver out. And that was maneuvering, unbolting the stub of the blade and maneuvering a 1.25 ton replacement blade into place. And the tolerances were so fine that you had to hold an oil seal in place under the blade as it was lowered in, because the pressure of the blade lower in would pop the oil seal out.
Mm-hmm.
So it involved somebody having their fingers in holding the oil seal while this 1.25 ton blade was lowered closer and closer to your fingers.
Hmm.
You get your fingers out at the last minute, and it was all done via chain hoists. So 2 divers in the water maneuvering this thing around with chain hoists, and then huge spanner on the nuts, again tightened up using a chain hoist.
Mhm.
Um, I was last one out de-rigging as it was getting dark,
Hmm.
and they'd been fishing off the back end of the ship, throwing hamburgers and stuff over. Someone had caught a small tiger shark off the back end of the ship, only 3, 4 feet long. And as we were de-rigging, they got underwater lights up to light up the workplace.
Right.
The lights went out for a minute, and I looked up, and there was a huge shape just between me and the lights, shark
Wow.
shape. Because the worst part about seeing a shark go is you don't know where it's gone to.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever swum as fast as from that A-frame of the propeller shaft up to the surface to get out,
Um,
knowing that there was something bigger than me in the water with
yeah.
me.
And tiger sharks too, which are,
Yeah.
they're not small.
So then not small. So I thought this was probably 7 feet long, but
Yeah.
when the beer's been flowing, it was 10 or 12.
Yeah. Luckily, it's very rare where a shark would bother a diver. You're probably
Yeah,
safer down there than you were on the surface.
absolutely. I mean, that's the only one I've ever seen
Oh,
really
really?
in the. Yeah, I've done some scuba, never ever seen another shark. I mean,
Hmm.
that would be my pinnacle, is to go cage diving with great whites,
Oh my
but
God.
it's never materialized. So lots of jobs. The mine disposal was always good. The satisfaction of seeing a £1,700 mine go up on time, because there was always penalties. If you cut the fuse wrong and it went off early or went off late, you got fined for beers. Um,
Was that
but
something you found, or was that something that was like a part of the training?
well, quite often fishermen would find them. They trawl, fishermen trawling in the Thames estuary for crabs, lobsters, cod,
Right.
etc. Would catch one in their nets.
Oh, wow.
So they'd mark it off, buoy it off, mark the position, contact the EOD Technical Information Centre,
Mhm.
who would then task us to come out and deal with it. We actually went to one where the fishermen had brought it inboard, pulled it up on the jetty, and when we got to it, one of them was sitting astride it, trying to open the shackle up, using that as like an anvil and hitting the shackle to try and loosen it, sitting on top of this mine. Now, the Germans, with a lot of these mines, they built in anti-handling devices, and they were actually technically brilliant. And the type that we used to deal with the most, the C-type airdrop mine, if a hydrostatic sensor didn't actuate, so if it landed on land, it would revert from being a ground mine into a random timed bomb to go off anywhere between 24 hours and 90 days. When it was hit the water and sank below, I think, 3 meters, it would arm itself. And then there'd be an anti-handling device that when the pressure was reduced, so if the mine was lifted, the anti-handling device would go off.
Mm.
They had numerous devices on the tail cone. One of the bolts on the tail cone was a dummy. So if it was turned, it would set off an anti-handling charge. If you were successful at getting the tail cone off, there were photoelectric sensors that if they were exposed to light would set it off.
Mm.
So many things. And a lot of the time, the only reason they didn't detonate was they were built by what was effectively slave labor.
Mm.
So they'd be sabotaged in the factories.
Mm.
Bend a firing pin, etc. But just because this thing's been rolling around for 40 or 50 years on the seabed and hasn't gone off doesn't mean to say it's not capable of going
Yeah,
off.
you have no idea.
No idea whatsoever. I was told stories when I was in my EOD class that when these things had actually been dismantled, sometimes 15, 20 years later, there was still power in the batteries. So the clocks would still work.
Yeah.
So they were technologically brilliant. Yeah, they were interested. That was our bread and butter. We spent so many times going up and down to the Thames estuary to deal with these. We were very
Yeah.
rarely at home. we had a spate of anti-tank mines uncovered during storms on the Norfolk coast.
Yeah.
And those ones were as simple as pick it up, stick it on your chest, swim out into the sea, drop it down to the seabed, and swim back in and light the fuse. And
you're swimming out there with a live bomb on your chest.
Swimming, yeah, basically on your back with a big anti-tank line sitting on your chest. And several times people said, "Didn't it worry you?" And the simple answer is, if you get it wrong, it's not your problem anymore, it's somebody else's.
Yeah.
The best place to be, if you're dealing with something like that, is sat on top of it.
Yeah.
Because if it goes wrong, you're not going to know anything about it.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. And as I said, all of a sudden, it's not my problem anymore.
Oh my God. And so your career lasted about how long in doing?
15 years.
Wow. It was
Yeah.
15.
It added up to something in the region of 30 or 40,000 minutes underwater.
My God. Amazing.
Yeah, so we every dive was logged, and we had to get a minimum of 120 minutes every 3 months to maintain our special service pay.
And so then what happened? What?
Sorry?
No, I'm just saying then, so when when the military career is coming to an end, then what were you thinking?
That came to an end. So I decided that I'd like to do some commercial diving. I ended up, actually, I was a PADI instructor for a little while.
I'm PADI certified.
Yeah. And I was in touch with, it was an ex-Navy diver before my time, and he said, "There's a job on if you want it." And this job transpired. There was a fishing vessel that sunk in the northwest of Iceland, and the family of the fishermen had petitioned to have the wreck investigated or recovered, at least to try and recover their loved ones. And a company in England had got the tender for it, and we were originally going to do scuba, which was the Carlton Mark 16 closed circuit rebreather. It was sitting in 83 meters of water, which is approaching the limit for the Mark 16, which was, I think, 100 meters. It's still quite sketchy to do a surface sort of scuba dive to that depth with no surface support. And the reason it didn't come off at that stage was they couldn't hold the Mark 16s. So it was off. Then it was back on again using surface supply. So I went out, spent 4 weeks out there sitting over this wreck to search for and recover the crew from the fishing vessel, and then do video surveys of various parts of it that the owners wanted to see if they could see why it had sunk. So we got 2 of the crew members back, recovered them. That's I've done body recoveries before in the Navy, and even though you know what you're looking for, when you find it, it's still a shock. Yeah. Even though you know exactly when they loom out of the gloom at you in limited visibility, it's a shock. And then trying to maneuver somebody that was taller than me, the one that I ended up being partially responsible for the recovery of, he must have been 6'3", 6'4", and I'm 5'10". So to try and maneuver that person out of a very confined space, he was still in his bed, and get him onto a basket that they'd lowered down, stretcher basket, to be recovered, took some doing. It's physically arduous, and you're trying to respect them as a person, but still you've got to manhandle people, and they're absolutely rock solid to try and get that person out. It was hard work, really hard work. Certainly got sweat on, breathing heavy at the end of that one. So did that. Then I ended up working back in Iceland for about another 6 weeks on some inshore projects. And then my ex-wife decided that I actually really had to get a proper job rather than just playing at working and being away again. I'd come out of the Navy because my ex-wife was expecting our first child, and I didn't want to be an absent father.
Right.
So when I came out of the Navy, I did exactly that, to become an absent father by going away and doing commercial diving work. So I ended up working for our civil service for a while, but nothing really. The diving industry is very hard to get into and very hard to stay in. Out of all the people I've known through my career, I've probably known 5 or 6 that have made a really, really successful career out of commercial diving. It is a very competitive, cutthroat world, and it's quite short-lived. Most of them did some really good jobs, got out, got into property development, or got into something else. They made their money in the diving world. There's only a couple of 3 that I know are still working, and they're always like, "I'll quit after this one. I'll quit after this one." They've got more money than they know what to do with, but you live to your means, I think.
Right.
So that was it. Now I work in health and safety.
And what does that entail?
I work for one of the UK universities, and I'm their health and safety advisor. So I'm responsible for fire safety, all the occupational health and safety for staff, and disaster recovery and business continuity. So I compile all the disaster recovery plans, conduct desktop exercise and business continuity training. It's low stress.
Yeah. Well, we're not like like we're not 23 anymore.
It's exactly that, Alice. I don't want stress in my life anymore.
Yeah.
No. As much as I enjoyed that, it's a young man's job.
Yeah.
It's a short-term career, really. Physically, it takes it out of you. I've got loss of hearing due to high pressure gas, etc. I've got joint problems. I know guys that have got worse problems than me. We seem to have
because
short
you're doing
lifespan.
marathons still.
Well, yeah, but my body doesn't thank me afterwards. We're training for a trans-Iceland run next year. So from Akureyri in the north to the south coast, right across the Highlands. So it's basically a north to south transection of the islands, which is 210 miles in 9 days. So it works out about a marathon day. It's a 10-day trip. We've got 1 rest day in between. It's fully supported. So there's a support crew, but it's all wild camping because there is simply nowhere to stay. So it'll be pitch tents on the lava fields in the Highlands and get up and do a marathon a day, split into probably 8 to 10 mile chunks, but you've still got to cover the distance. But I blame my wife for that one. That's her midlife crisis. She follows a lot of people that do a lot of ultras, and she saw this come up at a show we were at, an outdoor show, and she said, "I think I'd really like to do that." Okay, if that's what you want, then we'll go and do it. So we're right into our training now, building miles up.
Yeah. Well, as I can say is look at you, you're still fit, you're still strong. You can the fact that you can do that at your age says something. Yes, there's going to be a lot of aches and pains, trust me. I know. I'm dealing with right now 3 injuries that I'm kind of dealing with. One, I have from scuba diving, I got a vitreous detachment. The gel inside my eye detached, and this little glob is kind of floating around. That was from practicing my buoyancy, and it was just going up and down a lot. Then I got nerve damage in my thumb from Kung Fu, just sparring, and got hit the wrong place, the wrong time, at the wrong speed, with the wrong force. Then I got a back issue that I'm dealing with. I tried water skiing for the first time, and the boat took off real fast and went, and just jerked my back out. So I said, let's do it. Okay. I didn't get up. So of course I was like, well, let's try again. And it went, and I said, well, we got to do it one more time. I got to get up. And I'm like, okay, I give up.
I've never, ever managed to get up water skiing. Ever.
Oh my God, thank you so much. I felt so bad not being able to do it. If you couldn't do it, I'm like, all right, I'm good.
Yeah, the team used to have a set of water skis, and if we were away anywhere warm, they'd get them out and put them behind the inflatable could barely get up to enough speed to get
Yeah,
you up. But
yeah.
even so, I couldn't get the grip of it. I was either leaning too far forward or fall off sideways or just couldn't even get up. So water skiing's not for me,
All right, so I don't
really.
feel so bad now.
So
So, and
yeah. Well,
yeah,
I think you have to keep fit.
yes.
I see so many people, and the worst of it is we have a reunion dinner every year.
Mhm.
We basically get back together, drink loads, tell tall stories, which get taller with age. And the unfortunate thing is our number is getting less and less. I've got another funeral to attend on Friday of one of my ex-colleagues that passed away at
Mm.
57 years old. We get less and less every year. And I see people that I was working with who have not kept themselves fit.
Mm.
You know, as you say, genetics plays a big part in it. That
Mhm.
some of us are more predisposed to being more resilient, excuse me, in older age. And but I think it's it's sad to let yourself go.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that there's a responsibility to yourself to stay fit and healthy as much as
And
possible.
your family, you know.
Yeah, to enjoy your children, your
Mhm.
grandchildren, if you get to that stage,
Mhm.
and just have a nice life
Yeah,
together for as long as possible. You know,
yeah,
it's going to catch everybody at some point that I'm not. You know, maybe the next year will be the last big thing that I do.
yeah.
I don't know. I hope not. But
No.
you never know what's around the corner. And I think it's sad to let yourself go. And I think everybody should stay as fit as they possibly can for as long as they possibly can.
I tell a lot of my students, health is wealth. You know, it's the only real
Yeah.
wealth you can that's tangible.
Well, one of the training um, that I do at work is manual handling,
Mhm.
which is basically teaching staff how to pick things up and put things down without hurting themselves. And one of the points I get across is, what do you enjoy doing? Give me three things that you enjoy doing,
Yeah.
and then highlight how a back or a leg injury accrued at work through poor handling techniques can
Mhm.
affect their enjoyment of life, can affect their hobbies, their
Mhm.
earning ability,
Mhm.
their actual quality of life
Mhm.
overall. You know, chronic pain, there's a lot of people live with chronic pain, and
Mhm.
it's debilitating.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
there's a big difference between getting up and things are creaking and aching and you're stiff and aching from the day before to living with chronic pain.
yeah.
And I want to try and stave that off as long as possible.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we're gonna little over the hour mark here. I'm gonna end it here. It's a good place to end it to, hopefully inspire people to stay fit, stay healthy, even if, the irony of a reckless guy being now health and safety is not lost on me.
Oh, I was terrible as a child. I had the local police come to my house with a warrant for my arrest.
One time. One.
Yeah, my parents didn't know, and this was I got in with a crowd of bikers when I was younger that could have led me down the wrong road.
Yeah.
The reason why I didn't end up in the career path that I started off wanting to go in was basically I was reckless and was not disciplined enough to do what I needed to do, and it was just
Yeah.
having fun.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm fortunate that I ended up in a job where, at the time, a lot of it wasn't fun, but looking back, it is absolutely the best thing I've ever done, best job in the world. And as I say, to be able to say, when you see a Bond film, yeah, I've done that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I've done that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean,
So
you can't have any regrets with all of that. That is just an amazing story and an amazing adventure and an amazing life that you led.
thank you. Yeah,
And
I'm looking back, and I don't tend to talk to many people about it because I find that some of it sounds so far fetched that unless you have a concept of the work, you think that you're actually lying. You're not telling the truth there. You're making this up, because
Yeah.
some of the stuff that we did was of that ilk, that, and a lot of people don't understand. And my humor and the humor of a lot of the guys that I used to work with is quite gallows, dark humor,
Mhm.
which
You have
kind of
to.
got you through a lot of
Yeah.
the what you were dealing with.
Mhm.
We saw some pretty horrendous things when I was out in the Gulf.
Mhm.
The only thing that gets you through is gallows humor.
Yeah.
So civilians, as we call them, don't get that,
Mhm.
and they don't appreciate it. So if people ask, I'll tell them. If they don't ask, I'm not the sort of person that goes, "Come and sit down here and let me tell you all
Yeah.
about what I used to do." Even
Yeah.
even even my son doesn't know really everything that
Right.
we've done. If he asks, I'll tell. If he don't, again, don't ask and I won't tell.
Well,
But thank you very much for,
okay, you say that? What'd you say?
yeah, thank you very much for asking.
Well, I have to say that I have to thank you very much for writing that story. I have to thank you very much for sharing that life of adventure that you had. It's so inspiring and so amazing.
Thank you very
Again,
much.
thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your service.
Oh, no, you're welcome. And hopefully we'll meet in person at some point.
That would be brilliant. I'm actually going to be in London in October, so maybe we can.
Are you? I'll tell you what, hit me up when you're in London. I'll host you for dinner and drinks at my club in London, which I think you might be very interested in.
That's a date. All
Yeah,
right. Thank you very much. That's
brilliant.
another episode of Always Say Yes to Adventure. And go to the 007 GB website to check out his article, My Life as a Navy Frogman. You will be just completely enthralled.